Jake Paul, Nate Diaz preview with Daniel Cormier and Teddy Atlas here. I love it. I love Jake Paul fights. I love the whole promotion behind it. I think it's amazing. I know it's a polarizing situation. I know people hate Jake Paul. I know people hate his fights. But that's the whole point, right? Boxing is all about promotion. It's more, sometimes it's more about promotion than in-ring stuff. And I know people are upset about that, but it's the truth. So we're going to listen to Teddy and DC break down the fight. We'll talk about the entire thing, the whole show, if it's good for boxing and whatnot. Here we go.
No one will mistake the fight this weekend for two guys that will be considered all-time greats, as Jake Paul returns to fight Nate Diaz. Now, I thought when Jake Paul fought Tommy Fury, he looked like you would expect a novice boxer to look like, because he seemed a bit behind and he was just kind of winging punches. But then when I look at him against Nathan Diaz this weekend, what do you see? And does Nate Diaz have an actual chance to beat this guy in a boxing ring? Because for one thing, Paul does do, he does have some of the fundamentals, and he is training hard to become a pro boxer.
One of the reasons I respect this so much is because, like, think about who Jake Paul is, right? Like, think about Jake Paul when he was on Biz Aardvark on the Disney Channel, or when he was doing Vines, or when he's doing YouTube, or when he was doing whatever. Imagine if he would have told you, I'm going to be the biggest draw in boxing in the world. It'd be insane, right? It would be the craziest thing ever. I mean, he went from fighting YouTubers, bad YouTubers. He went from that to being a legitimate pay-per-view selling ESPN, I mean, big names guy. And say what you want about these are washed up fighters. You know, these are the Tyron Woodleys and the Ben Askrens and the whoever. But he's doing it. It takes some serious brass to get it, to promote a fight, get in front of millions of people and fight a former UFC champion, to fight a pro boxer. Tommy Fury's a pro boxer. You know, I mean, is he a champion? No, but he's a pro boxer. And Jake Paul is in there. You know, like Nate Diaz is Nate Diaz. Like, Nate, I understand it's different, but you're boxing a guy who beat Conor McGregor. It's wild that Jake Paul, and for all intents and purposes, for Logan Paul too, it's crazy to say, like, what they're doing. It's crazy that Logan Paul got in the ring and fought Floyd Mayweather. All that stuff is nuts. And you have to give them credit for being able to pull it off, for being able to do these insane things that they're saying they're doing. If Logan Paul during his Vine days would have told you, I'm going to fight Floyd Mayweather on pay-per-view and I'm going to go the distance, and you can say, well, Mayweather was holding up, or Mayweather was, you know, carrying him or whatever, he still did it. He still did it. You got to tip your cap to that. I certainly do tip my cap to this, regardless of the boxing acumen. It's something else that I think people forget is how, and I don't understand why professional boxers don't do this, but imagine being like the 4th ranked boxer in Jake Paul's weight division. Like, imagine being that person. Who is it? Who the hell knows? Do you know who it is? Probably not. Let's go ahead and do a good old-fashioned test. Let's see the ranked boxers, and let's see how many of them you even have heard of. Okay, did y'all have any of these guys on your bingo card? Jai Opetaia, Chris Billum-Smith. These guys are champions. Bridas, Dorticos, Jack, Riak Porhe, Cislak. Who are these guys? Makabu, Billum-Smith, Poppin, Gulamarian. Who are these guys? Masternak has fought 52 times. These are the cruiserweight rankings on Box.live. Who are these guys? So whenever you're telling me, like, oh, well, Jake Paul's ruining boxing, Jake Paul's not a boxer. My man Gulamarian is 27-0, the 9th ranked cruiserweight in the world. And if he walked in here right now, I wouldn't know who the hell he was. Gulamarian and Masternak have a combined 70 fights. They've lost a combined 5 times. And I've never heard of either one of them at all. They couldn't draw. They couldn't draw if they were in a colored pencil factory. All right? Jake Paul can draw. Say what you want. Say what you want about being a purist or being a boxing fan or whatever, but I have a sneaky feeling Jai Opetaia 2020 or 22-0 versus Goulamirian 27-0 and Masternak 47-5 in a triple threat boxing match probably wouldn't sell too many pay-per-views. I have a sneaky feeling it would be on ESPN for free at about 11:30 p.m. on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, listen, a lot of people poo-poo Paul. Comes from the, comes from the world that he comes from, YouTube world, whatever the hell world that is, But I give him credit. He respected the sport, and he got a trainer, a real trainer. He put time in, put a few years in now, worked his backside off, learned the things, the rudiments of the sport that he needed to learn. Again, respected the sport. And he's a work in progress. He's getting better. And he has raised his game to a certain level where...
Big time. You go watch his first fights against a Nissan Gibb or Deji or whoever he was fighting, and then you go watch him fight Woodley and Askren and even Tommy Fury. It's a different guy. Granted, he's got all the time in the world to train. He's got all the money in the world to get the best trainers. He's got, all that stuff. But it is what it is. You gotta give him credit. The guy has turned himself into maybe not a pro boxer, but pretty close enough, certainly close enough. It's kind of wild. It also is impressive of what you can do if you do dedicate yourself to something. Jake Paul dedicated himself to being a boxer. And look at him. He's headlining these fights. If he beats Nate Diaz, he's selling pay-per-views, and he would have beaten 4 MMA champions. That's impressive.
You know what? He's not that bad. I'm not getting crazy and putting him in there, with guys that have been boxing for years at a certain level. He's lost his first fight to a boxer who wasn't great, but he was a boxer throughout his whole career. And he wasn't an older guy. So I get it. But it was competitive. It was still competitive. And you got to give him credit. He's fighting all pros. Yeah, older guys, MMA guys that aren't necessarily great strikers. Their strength is more on the grappling, on jiu-jitsu.
What's kind of funny, too, is how people are like, oh, he's fighting, older fighters or people out of their prime or whatever. But how many boxers fight tomato cans? How many boxers have inflated records because they fought absolute nobodies? You go back and look at Mike Tyson's first 8 fights. I would say some of those guys were out of their prime. I would say some of the guys are older. I would say some of those guys are, not exactly pro boxing level people. Jake Paul is not a professional boxer. And in Jake Paul's, 7th fight ever, he fought an undefeated pro boxer, young guy, and Tommy Fury. This is a very normal thing. It's a very normal thing for a up-and-coming boxer, or even a UFC fighter, to have a cupcake schedule or cupcake fights here and there, or people that say that, I would tell them, go look at any boxer's first 7 fights and see how good the opposition is.
So on the floor, but there's still pro athletes. There's still pro fighters. They still have this, that they can go into an uncalm arena and be calm, that they can put the fear and all the things that can paralyze other people, put it to the side, and they can go and find a way to get to you. He's dealing with those guys that have a PhD in that. He hasn't gotten a PhD in that yet. Nate Diaz.
That's what impressed me about Woodley, is that Woodley, super athletic guy, obviously, and a champion. He's been in the arena. He's been in the moments where he's got 40,000 people, 50,000 people in a sold-out T-Mobile arena in Las Vegas, and he's wearing the UFC gold, and he's in a championship fight, and he is winning. That mentality, that you can't teach that. You can't learn that. You can't buy that. You can't. It's just something that people have or they don't have. Like the fact that Jake Paul, who has never been in that space, I don't care how much practice you have. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how many trainers you have or nutritionists or whatever. followers on Instagram. When you're in a ring like that and the bright lights are on, a lot of people would fold. A lot of people would fold, and Tyron Woodley's athleticism and experience and whatever would have been the difference maker. Jake Paul didn't fold. Whether that's just being so egotistical or such a narcissist that he has this insane level of belief, I don't know. But it led him to not only winning, but knocking Woodley completely out. Like, I think it's impressive. And the people who say, well, his 1-2 combo isn't as crisp as a pro boxer from Belarus or whatever those other, who cares, man? It's just, this is one of those things I think you have to really respect. Same with Nate Diaz. Like, think about what Nate Diaz felt during those fights against Conor McGregor. Think about the lead up. Think about walking in that arena, thinking about hearing the music, thinking about when he is in the ring and Conor McGregor's music hits at the peak, absolute height of Conor McGregor's legacy, and Nate Diaz stopped him. Think about the mindset of that person. Think about how long Nate's been training, how many fights he's been in, how many training camps, all that stuff. You think about all that experience, all that time, everything he's been through. And then you think about Jake Paul, who a couple years ago was fighting YouTubers. It's just miles apart.
Has a PhD in that. And because of that PhD, you can't count Nate Diaz out because of that mental resolve, that realm that is his realm, that he knows how to find a way, not to be deterred, not to give in any way, not to be compromised. People are compromised when they get into that environment. And that's one thing. He doesn't get compromised, Diaz. So he has that going for. But I agree with you. I think I'm picking Paul to win a fight. And the reason I'm picking him to win a fight is he has developed himself enough. And I'll make it real simple. He throws straighter punches than Diaz. How's that for you, Daniel? He's got the straight jab. I think that can control Diaz on the outside.
Something else, like people always say, like, oh, well, they're throwing the fights, the other people. You think Tyron Woodley, you think Ben Askren, you think Nate Diaz, you think these guys with these careers and these legacies and that killer instinct, fighter spirit, whatever it is that led them to the top of the sport, you think they want to lay down for Jake Paul? Like, you think at this point Nate Diaz wants to lay down for Jake Paul? No way. Like, there's no way I will believe that. There's no way that I'll believe that Tyron Woodley or Nate Diaz, after the legacy they have, the careers they have, all the stuff they've built, the tears, the sweat, the blood they poured to get to the level they're at, there's no way I can believe, like, they said, you know what? I will get knocked out. I will allow that to happen for Jake Paul.
And he's got the straight right hand. And sometimes Diaz, well, he breaks the rules. He breaks the laws in the ring where he'll throw wide punches right in front of you. And if you throw a wide punch, you don't need me to tell you. You learned that in geometry, didn't you? Where straight beats round. I mean, even I learned that. Straight beats round. So one thing, Paul has gotten down where he'll throw those punches nice and straight. He's done a good job with that. That and the experience that he's gained where, again, he doesn't fall apart in that domain. He doesn't fall apart in that domain. He'll never be what Diaz is in that domain, but he'll be good enough to, again, win another fight, I believe.
For Nate Diaz, he's got to be smart enough, but he's got to kind of use his activity and his experience if he wants to get the job done this weekend. If he stands out at range and tries to just box Jake Paul, I think he will have a difficult time keeping up with him. But I do believe that if he tries to overwhelm him, he might give himself a chance. Because one thing that Nate Diaz does is Nate Diaz can fight at a really high pace, and he can keep a really high pace.
Yeah, I think if he fights at that super high pace we've seen that the Diaz brothers can fight at, I think if he's, overwhelming Paul with punches and being crafty and kind of using some of that experience, I think it will kind of confuse Jake Paul. I think Jake Paul wants to get in a straight up boxing fight. I think that's what he's trained for. But the way that Nate, the way that his brother have fought in the UFC, the way they kind of use their cardio and that pace. If he can do that, I think this is a tricky fight for Jake Paul. But if Nate just says, let's stand here and box, that's not exactly what Nate wants to do.
For an extended period of time, I have seen Jake Paul at times slow down as the rounds is going on in his fights. So Diaz
Jake Paul certainly has gotten tired.
Thank you for watching.
Ladies, Telly was kind of falling apart at the end there. Let me know what you guys think. This is super polarizing, understandable. I'm not saying you got to like Jake Paul. I'm not even sure I like Jake Paul. You got to respect him. Will you be watching the fight? Let me know in the comments below where you come down on this kind of stuff. Does it make you sick? Does it make you want to vomit all over your shoes anytime Jake Paul's in the news? Or do you like the spectacle and you'll be watching this? Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you in the next video.